What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives of the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today I have the Wii Knives Nexusia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Nexusia, maybe? I don't know. And this is a kind of my first Wii branded knife, and it's kind of weird, right? I've been in the in knife collecting for a little while, so I have some OEM knives, right? So some knives that were produced by Wii Knives, but not a Wii branded knife. So this is kind of a first for me, and this one kind of caught my eye first because I'm a sucker for compound grinds. Any knife that has a compound grind immediately captures my attention. It's a little bit stupid, but you know, we all have our quirks. So that's what happened with this one. So let me kind of give you a tour of the knife and we can get started. What you have here is about a 3.5, I think it's just shy of 3.5 inch blade. So you have basically all belly. There's basically no flat on this blade. You've got a compound ground tip. You have a drop point, a full length kind of fuller that kind of describes the arc of the top. You have a little bit of Damascus here at the pivot. You have speed holes all throughout that have been anodized on the inside. Hopefully that's coming across. I'm gonna kind of show you here. So it's kind of blue anodized. You have a mill titanium cockpit clip. I really like the little wee blue anodized on the kind of stone wash titanium. You've got blue hardware in the back, and you have some speed holes that kind of match the front, and a titanium frame lock, right? You have an over travel stop, you have a lock bar insert, and it's M390. So that's kind of what we have. I think there's several different variations of this. There's different colors, and they did a run. I think they're gonna do another run, so be on the lookout. I'm not sure if you can get this one. The price for this one, I want to say under $400, $300, $375, maybe thereabouts, just about that. So let me give you some size comparison. So it's not a small knife. So what you have here, let me give you against the Para 2 and the Para 3. So sharpened blade length, this is kind of a strange one because you have a really large choil to choke up here, which eats a large portion of the blade. So sharpened blade length, it's probably in the neighborhood of the Para 2. But you know, we always talk about how the Para 2, the handle to blade ratio is kind of out of whack, right? There's a lot of handle here on the back for very little blade. That's kind of what you have here, and kind of for the same reason. You have this kind of forward choil on the Para 2, and you have this forward choil on this one. Now for the Para 2, it's kind of integrated into half of it is on the scales right here, and half of it is on the blade. Here, a lot of it is on the blade. So you end up with kind of the same kind of sharpened blade length here. It's a fairly thin knife. Blade stock is fairly thin. So let me show you. So yeah, thinner overall than the Para 2. Hopefully that comes across here. It's thinner overall than the Para 2. And the blade stock, let me see there. So hopefully you can see it's thinner blade than the Para 2. So usually the Para 2 is considered a very slicey knife, especially with a full flat grind. This one for shallow cuts, or we'll get to that when we get into cutting, but it's fairly slicey. This is the full size bug out, and this is the mini bug out. Okay. So thickness wise, it's probably closer in the neighborhood of the full size bug out. Obviously, it's This one is it's a much taller blade. It's a much longer blade. But in the pocket, because the scales are fairly thin, there's some internal milling, and you've got the speed holes. So this one doesn't. It's not as heavy as you might think. It's actually a little bit on. When you see it and you hold it, it's a little bit on the lighter end of what I imagined it to be. So that's kind of what the knife looks like in comparison to the other ones. So let's start with ergonomics. And in my hand, this knife has fairly decent ergonomics. Actually, I would go as far as to call it good ergonomics. The only reason that it's not great ergonomics is when you have knives that are kind of thinner in this dimension. I have large hands, so I feel like I'm holding something that's very, very narrow, right? It doesn't fill my hand. I have the same feel with like the Grimsmo Norseman, right? It's got the contouring, but it's a fairly thin. So that's kind of what this feels like. But the contouring is heavy, right? So you have this area for your back three fingers, for your index right here. The jimping is in the exact right spot. The jimping is not aggressive, but the problem is that because you have this kind of swedge here, this becomes a little bit thin. So it's kind of like a little bit sharp. It's uncomfortable is what I would call it. Obviously, you can choke up right here. You can get really, really, really close to the action, right? But it comes at the expense of a good, man, that's kind of got to be like half-inch blade, right? If they just done like a sharpening choil and you don't choke up and you're back here, it's a lot of blade. I'm not saying that would have made it a whole lot better, but I think they're sacrificing a lot of blade to have that choil, and then you start getting into, so if you want to sharpen it, obviously you don't have a problem because of this huge choil, but you just be careful that you have to stay away from this kind of area of the. So ergonomics are pretty darn good. Not outstanding. Just again, I can't. I usually like a knife that it fills my hand a little bit more. Thin knives, they're easier to carry, but I can't hold them. I can't grab onto them. So, action is really good. Very much in the flavor of a Riyadh knife. So deployment, you got a flipper tab, excellent. I guess you can try and do the fuller. I can't get into. I think it's meant to be deployed with a flipper tab only. Okay, that's what I think. For closing, you kind of have to shake it a little bit, just a bit, not much. But I think the action is really good. The blade is so thin that it's not a heavy blade, right? It's not a heavy blade, and because it's not a heavy blade, it doesn't kind of drop shut from right there, right? Like I have to keep nudging it, right? At no point does it kind of fall shut by itself. But I do think I like the control drop shuttiness of it. It doesn't feel 100% smooth, but I think the action is really good. I don't think anybody's going to complain about the action. I think it's probably a positive of the knife more than anything. It's nothing that you're going to say, oh my God, Shirogorov type action. No, it's not that. I would say it's probably about 95% of Riyadh action or 90% of Riyadh action. If you felt any of those knives, very similar. Okay, very similar to that. I would say that they've nailed the action fairly well. Fit and finish. You can decide whether you like the design of this knife or not, and it's kind of a little bit polarizing, right? It's got a lot of things going on. It's got the fuller, it's got the drop points, it's got the compound ground, speed holes, Damascus. It's got a lot of stuff going for it. So you can decide whether you like it or not. But the execution of this is really, really good. It's outstanding. and it shows in a couple of spaces. And the first one that I like quite a bit, and I've complained about some other knife makers in the past, is the transition between this type of grind and this type of grind, the compound. This little line right here, a lot of knife makers, they end up rounding those corners. It's not a crisp transition, either when they're doing their, they're kind of trying to hide their mistakes when they kind of buff it out and they kind of round it off. Not here. You get really, really, really good. You got a little bit of a kind of stone wash here, and the contrast between the stone washed fuller and the belt satin swedge and blade and tip. I think that all works out really, really, really nicely. It's a hollow grind, okay? And I'll talk about cutting here in a second, but fit and finish on this is really, really good. The polished insides. I'm gonna get you a little bit closer to this. The polished sides of this, of these holes, right, where you get. It reminds me a little bit of the Olamic Wayfarer speed holes, where they color the inside. It gets kind of polished, and so I think it looks really, really good. The pocket clip's very effective. So I think from a fit and finish standpoint, I would say that it is on par with anything that Riyadh makes, and that's high praise. I think that Riyadh makes fantastic knives. I think this is a really, really well executed knife. Again, that when I speak about fit and finish, I'm not talking about do I like the knife, do I like the shape, the aesthetics, the form, whatever, or the performance. It's for whoever designed it, they executed it really, really good. So something that is a little bit weird to me is this little thing right here. I'm not sure what that's for. It doesn't have external stop pins, right? So you can see here, it doesn't have external stop pins. It's not really, it's kind of like a continuation of this, but I don't know. That looks a little bit bizarre to me. Now, cutting. So generally when we have this hollow grind with a compound, what happens is you have usually a thicker blade stock. So you end up with a knife that cuts really, really well for shallow cuts, right? Chords, some cardboard that's flat on something that's flat, on a table or on a surface. Those kinds of things. You end up with something that does really, really well for that. But as soon as you start cutting higher up, like going through cardboard, right? Something that you have to kind of cut through using the whole blade, right? That the whole blade is going to pass through. Usually it becomes too thick, and usually those knives don't perform as well in that. Well, this one's kind of a little bit different because the blade stock is so thin and it's hollow. So this gets to a ridiculously thin edge. It gets really, really thin. So slicing through cardboard, it starts out super easy, and then it doesn't get very thick. So it's a very slicey blade. So if you're looking for something that is slicey and really, and I would say that this is very heavy duty just because it gets really, really thin. I wouldn't put this to any hard use. Even with kind of the reinforced tip of the compound grind, I think this is not a thick knife. So I would say that you can slice quite a bit, but I wouldn't put anything that requires any kind of lateral stability. I wouldn't use this knife for any of that. But if sliciness is what you're looking for, I think this is a very, very slicey knife. Super slicey if you're using just the bottom portion of it, and extremely slicey, think kind of Parrot 2 type sliciness, maybe a little bit better than that. So that's kind of what you get with this in performance. Airing of grievances. I think I mentioned. I think the choil is way too big. I think you're kind of wasting a lot of blade here. To choke up, maybe if you really need to choke up here and to do some fight work, maybe some people, I think I would do the trade-off of being able to choke up and have that control for having an extra half inch of a blade. I think I like the design of this quite a bit. I think it almost looks, I'm not going to say Todd Beggish, but you know, where there's a lot of details, there's a lot of stuff going on this knife. I wish that the tip, it feels like it's too small, the compound. I wish that they did it a little bit just larger. It's kind of this tiny little thing. That's just aesthetics. I think that's just me being picky about it. So guys, hopefully this has been helpful to you. Again, I think they're gonna do another run. Take a look. I'm not sure if you can still find it, where you would find it, but if you like it, if you enjoyed it, then like and subscribe. Until I see you at the next one. Take care.